Hello, back again to the general prologue with yet another character which Geoffrey Chaucer has presented to us. While we have been reading this text, we have come across all God's plenty. They are a composite of the four humors: the hot, cold, moist, and dry. Chaucer is a dispassionate and a truthful artist who is portraying these characters before us so that they stay immortal in our memories. And he does his task such that we are directed to the style how we can speak discreetly and truthfully and in a lifelike manner the people who exist in our times as well. One may be faced with a difficulty in describing those qualities of the persons as may disqualify the person as being a human at all. But Chaucer does it in his own style. And after the two characters, the doctor of physic, whose only mission in life is to assimilate, to acquire gold, and the wife of Bath, who is a wife, a fair and a worthy wife, who dares take men also to the church door when she had had quite many secret affairs while in her youth. So these two people and the others that we have read earlier shouldn't give us an impression that is it to Canterbury that all of them are heading? Are all these travelers in a pilgrimage? Are they all pilgrims? With their slight and their great deviations from humanity, are they fit enough to be understood as pilgrims? No, we shouldn't feel bad because until now we have had one knight who fights for the faith. We also have had the clerk of Oxford, who is a good person. As a scholar, his only task is to find delight in learning and in teaching. But there is a Christ's image also there. And he is the good man was there of religion. Chaucer uses the word worthy when all the time he means unworthy. But this character is not worthy. Chaucer doesn't use the word worthy because that would be to impair the person of his essential goodness. He is a good man, the best creation of God on earth. He is a good man of religion. That means he is the man of religion. He is the man of great goodness. And he was a poor parson of a town. Parson is religious teacher. A person who teaches religion and who has also been assigned the task to collect the taxes. So he is the poor parson of a town. Do not be misled to believe that he was poor, but rich he was of holy thought and work. He was also a learned man, a clerk. Nothing difficult. What you need to understand about Parson is he's the good man of religion. He is poor in his possessions but rich in holy thought and work, and rich also in his learnings, and still a scholar of theology. How is he acquiring the learning? That Christ's gospel truly would he preach, his parishioners devoutly would he teach. So, what was he teaching to the people? He was teaching to the people the Christ's gospel, the teachings of Christ. And the parishioners are the people who lived in his parish, in his area of jurisdiction. He only taught them devotedly. Benign he was and wonder diligent, and in adversity full patient. So benign, discreet, dispassionate. What he has to do to one would he do to the other. And diligent, very hardworking. And in adversity, completely patient. And such he was, deprived of often siddhas. Full loath were him to curse for his tithas. So such was he deprived is tutored. He had tutored himself in all these situations, that full loath is loathed, Loathed. He hated the idea to curse the people if they were unable to pay the tithas. He was very kind. He would understand that if people are unable to pay their religious tax, that means there must be a reason, and he never cursed them as the friar did. As the friar, when he entered the home, he would extract money even from a widow. But this parson is very much unlike him. He hated to curse for the tiths, but rather would he give out of doubt unto his poor parishioners about. So instead of extracting them perforce, he would give them out of doubt. There is no doubt about it. He gave unto his poor parishioners about. So the tithes that he collected from the people who were wealthy, from that he parted with to help the poor parishioners. And with what did he suffice? Of his offering and also of his substance. Eke is also. So he used to help the people from the offerings that he got from the rich people, and not only from the offerings that he obtained, but also of his own substance. From his own earning also he would help the poor parishioners. He could in little thing have sufficiency. Why could he help? Because he found it sufficient to live in small amount of money. Because whatever he had, he thought it appropriate as a teacher to give from his own substance as well. Therefore, wide was his parish and houses far asunder. Very far off places also he took into consideration. Not that it was ascribed that he went to a small place, would he stay limited? No, he went farther off, but he never left not for rain nor thunder, in sickness nor in mischief, to visit the farthest in his parish, much and light. So for nothing would he leave his task of visiting the parishioners, neither in rain, nor in thunder, nor in sickness, nor in any trouble. He went to visit the farthest in his parish, much and light, on foot. So, as against the other pilgrims who have come on their dainty horses, on their pedigree horses, even the clerk of Oxford has come on a horse that is as lean as a rake is, but there is no mention of this parson having arrived to the Tabard Inn on any steed. He is light. light is on foot, upon his feet, and in his hand a staff. This noble example to his sheep he gave, that first he wrote and afterwards he taught. So he gave the noble example to his sheep. See, the imagery of the sheep has been employed. The innocent people in the parish have been compared with sheep. Sheep, because Jesus was in charge of the sheep, just as, so also is the person in charge of the sheep, the innocent people. So, this noble example to the sheep he gave, that first he wrote. So, whatever he taught, he routed himself, he wrote those qualities into his own personality, and afterwards he taught. A person, a teacher, is most revered if the teacher routes the qualities that he wants to see in others in his own being. So first he wrote and afterwards he taught. Out of the gospel he those words caught, and this figure he added also thereto, that if gold rust, what shall iron do? This is the best guiding principle for anyone who ought to be in church, but also who is there on this earth. If one feels a teacher is not formally the person who visits you in a class and delivers a kind of sermon, but teacher could be anyone from whom you learn something. So we would learn only from a person who has wrought those virtues in his personality. So this person from the gospel, from the Christ's gospel, he those words caught. He led his life on that dictum given by Christ, and he also added this figure. When he spoke to his people, he also said that if gold rust, what shall iron do? This is a metaphor. The gold is all the people who the ordinary people look up to, for example, and for the way of learning. So those people who are respected in society, they are the gold. And those people who, because of any suffering or any want, may fall victim to some kind of temptations, they are iron. So if gold starts rusting, if those who we look up to turn bad, then what will be the fate of iron? So, this also implies that he never found faults with people if they did anything wrong by mistake. Because in this world, where the gold was rusting, where the monk wore a gold brooch on his hat, where the nun had the gold letter A in her rosary, where the friar was busy collecting silver. In this state, he was the man who thought himself the gold. He carried this gold with great pride, and he believed that it was the gold of his soul with which he would touch the iron of the ordinary man. So he never rebuffed anyone for any mistake they might have committed, because he had the soul, he had the heart of gold. And to contain that heart of gold, he lived by the gospel of Christ. And he said that, for if a priest be foul on whom we trust, no wonder is a lewd man to rust. So if a priest turns foul on whom we all trust, then it's just ordinary that an ordinary man would rust. And he also said this, and shame it is if a priest keep a shitten shepherd and a clean sheep. He said that it is very shameful for a priest to keep, that means to have a spiced conscience. If a priest is untruthful, then it is an ignominy as much as there is a very unclean shepherd and a clean sheep. See, it is just demanded for a shepherd also to stay clean, because what is he in charge of? He is in charge of the pure white, the innocent white sheep. So he said it is shameful for a priest if he doesn't keep check upon his doings, because a dirty shepherd cannot be made in charge of a clean sheep. Well ought a priest example for to give by his cleanliness how that his sheep should live. So he also mentioned that a priest should teach by his own example. He should give from his own life the example by his own cleanliness how his sheep should live. Teaching by word would not help. Teaching by actions is the only task that a teacher should observe in life. He set not his benefits to hire, and let his sheep encumbered in the mire. So this shepherd, this parson, did not let his benefice on hire. Benefice is the land property. Even he possessed a land, but he did not give it on hire. He did not extract low paid labor from it. He let the people use it. And he did not allow his sheep encumbered in a mire. Encumbered means caught in a miserable situation, and mire is the storm that comes, the whirlpool that captures innocent creatures when they fall into it. So for him it was not appropriate that he should let his benefice on hire and his sheep might go astray. No, his main focus was to keep the sheep in good stead. And also, he did not run to London and to St. Paul's to seek him a shantery for souls. So he only ran to London to seek help for the souls of the poor parishioners, or with a brotherhead to be withhold, but dwelt at home and kept well his fold. So he, unlike the other people of religion who used to run to the St. Paul's church for all the time seeking help, no, he did not do that, but dwelt at home. He only stayed at his place and kept well his fold. His parish has been compared with the fold. Fold is the place where sheep are kept intact, where they live. The home of the sheep is the fold. So, unlike his other brotherhood, unlike his other friends, unlike the other parsons who would be making journey to the seniors to extract money, pleading for the poverty of these, no, he knew that he could keep his benefice to be used by his poor parishioners, so he only stayed at home and he only cared for his fold. Why did he do that? Why did he stay at home? So that the wolf never made it not miscarry. He was a shepherd and not a mercenary. So he stayed at home so that no wolf, a beautiful imagery of the sheep and the fold and the wolf has been juggled up to give to us the idea of Christ. Christ, for whom his people were his top priority. He never went seeking help from anyone because his intent to do good was so strong that he could work good. So also does this person work good. He did not allow wolf is temptation. He did not allow temptation to visit and miscarry the innocent sheep because he was a shepherd and not a missionary, someone who works, who has a mission to earn money also while one is doing the task of teaching. He was not that missionary. And though he wholly were and virtuous, he was to sinful men not dispiteous. A double negative has been used. Not dispiteous means he was piteous. So, although he was himself holy and very virtuous, but with sinful men he was very piteous. Nor of his speech dangerous nor dying, but in his teaching discreet and benign. So, in his speech also, when handling the sinful people, he was not dangerous and full of dignity. And in his teaching, he was discreet and benign, very friendly. To draw folk to heaven by fairness, by good example, this was his business. The usage of the word business is to make a contrast of the others who had taken their task as a business. And the other meaning of business is to be busy with something. So, this person, his all time business, the only thing with which he was occupied all the time was to draw folk to heaven by fairness, by his own fairness, by staying a clean shepherd. He was drawing his innocent folk to heaven, and that by setting a good example himself. But if there any person obstinate, whatsoever he were, of high or low estate, him would he snip sharply for the nonce. A priest, I swear, that nowhere known is. So, if a person was obstinate, if he stuck to his evil ways, then whatever he was, whether of a high or a low category, him would he snibben. Snibben is scold sharply for the disgrace and a better priest. So the parson has now been given the dimension of a priest. Chaucer says, I swear, I trow that nowhere known is. No one was as fair as this parson is. He waited after no pomp and reverence, nor made him a spiced conscience. But Christ's lore he and his apostles 12 he taught, but first he followed it himself. So he did not wait after. He was not bothered about any pomp, any show, any reverence. He did not decide and devise that people should respect him. No, he did not do that. Nor did he try to make a spiced conscience. How does one make a spiced conscience? By doing self promotion, by speaking good about their own selves. He did not do that. He just taught the Christ's lore, the benign teachings of Christ, and the 12 disciples of Christ. Their teachings he taught, but before teaching that, he followed it himself. Here ends the character of the parson. He stands out among all the characters, the worthiest of all from church. the worthiest of all from the whole of 14th century England. This is what Chaucer's anticipation was of a churchman and of a teacher. So, this good man has not come alone. He has a brother. With him there was a plowman, was his brother. So, just as the parson was working on the minds and spirits of his parishioners, so also his brother plowman was working on the physical fields of his brother. He was the plowman, he was a farmer that had led a dung full many a fodder. So he carried the fodder. When he had done his harvesting, he carried his own weight of fodder also. A true swinker and a good was he, living in peace and perfect charity. So, swinker, laborer. He was a true laborer and a good, like the good parson, he is also a good man, living in peace, Peace, and perfect charity. God loved he best with all his whole heart at all times, though he prospered or suffered. Gamed is prospered and smart is suffered. So, whether he was prospering or whether he was in suffering, he loved God the best with all his heart and then his neighbor right as himself. So, who would be a better follower of the gospel of God and his apostles 12 than this first man, the parson's brother, the plowman? And this is Chaucer's way of holding to great reverence the tillers of the land, the providers of food to the people. So, this plowman is a rightful brother of the parson. So, he loved his neighbor right as himself. And how did he love his neighbor? He would thresh and thereto dike and delve. He would do the threshing, removal of the seeds from the husk and dike, making furrows in the land, and delve, that means putting the seeds in for Christ's sake. So, whatever work he did, it was a surrender of services to God. For every poor person, white is person without hire, and he did not charge those poor people if it lay in his might. So if he had any spare time, then he would not sit an idler. He would go and help all his neighbors in their work on the fields. His tithes paid he full fair and well. He paid the taxes both on his proper labor and his cattle. So, whatever earnings he had, he paid tax on that and also on his cattle. In the tabard, he rode upon a mare. Mare is the female horse which can be purchased at a relatively very low price. So he should have been tired and he has come on a mare. These two characters are the ones who stand somewhere in the beginning of the latter half of the prologue. The first half of the train is led by the knight, and second half of the train is led by the parson, and he is immediately followed by the parson of the earth, the tiller of the earth, a true brother of the parson. The parson works upon the souls of his people, and his brother, the plowman, works upon the fields of God, Lord Christ, and his neighbors. These two are the characters who, when we read about them, and we see their pictures, we are awe-stricken and we are made to believe that this actually is a pilgrimage and there actually are there very good people. One is the good man of religion and the other is the good man on earth. Thank you.